Welcome back to Fast Forward Pride podcast with myself, Alessandro and Jason.
Hi.
Today is quite a special day in the calendar. 1st of December marks World AIDS Day. Many in our community have been affected by HIV/AIDS in many ways, directly or indirectly. And today we thought this episode would be dedicated to this topic, to explore the impact that HIV/AIDS has had on many generations of queer people.
And still has
and
today.
And still has today,
Yes.
Exactly. So we will start by exploring this topic from a very personal angle,
Yes.
Jason's angle. Because Jason obviously is known by many of you as the activist that has brought Trinidad and Tobago to court to remove homophobic legislation, and that case is still ongoing. But some of you might not know about the personal connection between Jason and the topic that we are covering today. So, Jason, I'd love to hear your story and how HIV/AIDS kind of intertwines with your journey.
Yes. Well, the first time that there was an article in the New York Times, very small little piece in 1981, I would have been 17 years old. So my entire life has been living with HIV/AIDS somewhere in the background. What many people don't really know is that Trinidad and Tobago had the second highest mortality rate per capita in the world from HIV/AIDS. We were second only to New York City. During that period of 1982 to 1992, I lost dozens of friends. We lost hundreds of gay men in Trinidad and undercover gay men who were in straight relationships. We had women and children, dying of the disease. And a lot of the research that found pathways forward, came from the intensive documentation that was able to be done in Trinidad as a microcosm of the virus. So, my whole life has dealt with HIV, losing close friends, losing 2 lovers to the disease, and it has shaped pretty much everything around who I am today. And a lot of my activism, though I'm not publicly an HIV activist, a lot of my activism is very connected to that. So, for example, the laws that criminalize gay men, the buggery law, that law, countries that have that law have 15 times higher incidences of HIV and lower detection rates and lower adherence to drugs because people are just too afraid to even be seen going to a clinic. One of my very young friends, Varun, he passed away 3 years ago from HIV/AIDS. 26 years old, and it was because he was so petrified of the stigma of being seen to even go into an HIV clinic in Trinidad. And, within our own community, that stigma, we see it playing out within our sex apps and pickup apps and social media, where people refer to being clean or being unclean as a way to discuss HIV status. And I myself have found the dating pool is very shallow because of the not an understanding of discordant relationships, and that those can be actually more powerful than when both of you are HIV negative, because at least when somebody is HIV positive, we have proper medical care that prevents you passing on HIV. And again, this is something that people don't realize. It's much better to know your status and get on effective treatment, and that prevents the passing on of HIV to sexual partners. So there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of discrimination and stigma. And, I really want to make it clear to people that, the stigma begins with you. You have to reach out and say to people that you are open to dating somebody who is HIV positive, that you don't have the issues, that you can have these discussions with your friends and your lovers, and make sure that we get past the issue. We've been living with HIV/AIDS now for over 40 years, and it's time we grow up, especially in the queer community.
And of course, compared to what was going on in the 80s, and where we had that lost generation, particularly of gay men, but this is not just a gay disease, right?
No.
And it's interesting. It's a little tangent here, but even the red ribbon, the reason why the color was chosen. Was actually, it wasn't the rainbow, it wasn't the pink that was very much used to kind of associate with the kind of gay movement at the time.
Yep.
It was red for blood, but it was red for passion and compassion and love as well, because that was the only way that we could get through this, by kind of holding on to our humanity and to the love that we still need to feel for each other. But that lost generation of people, those that survived and they will be in their 60s today. Some of my friends that are in their 60s, they say, I don't have anyone left. I lost them all to HIV/AIDS.
I've lost pretty much all of my contemporaries in Trinidad to HIV/AIDS.
It's shocking, right?
Yes.
Luckily today we have the medication that even for those that have the virus, they can stay undetectable, and that means they can't transmit.
Yes.
So there is this famous campaign: U equal U, undetectable equal untransmissible.
Yes.
And of course, on top of that, there's also PrEP. So we would hope that the fear and the stigma around HIV, is going away, because we're normalizing the idea that through PrEP, it's one of the things that we deal with and we protect ourselves against.
But even when PrEP came out, there was a lot of slut shaming in the gay community, saying, if you're on PrEP, you must be a slut. So, we have a lot of internal work that we need to do. And, coming back to the lost generation, I think the lost generation has definitely impacted on what we're seeing now with the rollbacks, because that generation were the generation of fighters. They were the generation that were really on the front lines of moving the needle forward. And when we saw that generation get lost, what came in was a very white-centric, heteronormative identity. And those queer people that we lost, who were on the real kind of beginnings of defining what a queer identity could and should look like, was really eradicated. And in its place came this very kind of very kind of tertiary educated white gay and lesbian who wanted to emulate their parents and wanted to just kind of fit into society and not stand out, whereas our generation did stand out, and through that we had to fight. So we found a marginalization creeping into queer activism, where trans people were ignored, gay men were ignored, women, forget it, nowhere on the spectrum, and of course HIV positive people being completely marginalized. I mean, one of the shocking things that happened with the HIV movement here at that time, with the next generation of young people being infected, was they said, we're not disabled, because we used to have disability benefits and disabled parking badges and all the things that a disabled person benefits that a disabled person gets. And they said, no, we're not disabled. We just take a pill a day. And it's just like, well, that's fine for you. But what about the single African mother with 3 kids? She could use that disability badge for her life.
The status, the legal status of someone who's HIV positive changed.
And it was changed.
Protected under disability.
It was protected under disability, and then white gay men said, no, we're not disabled, and said, we don't want to be identified as being disabled. And again, that white privilege has seeped into every aspect of queer advocacy right now.
And ableism, right? Like the refusal that our identity might align with a disability.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we're not just talking about the intersection of HIV with LGBTQ plus rights, which, again, that separation happened in the late 90s, early noughties, because, again, white queer people didn't want to be identified with HIV. It lost favor. So now we're seeing, particularly with PrEP, and a younger generation who say, no, I don't have these issues, that it's coming back into a kind of social discussion within our community, which is where it should be. Until there's a cure, we're still living with it. 750,000 people die every year from AIDS.
Wow.
most of them are black and brown bodies in the global south. But we did have a gay man die 2 weeks ago here in London. Right, but he also had mental health issues alongside of it. But we are seeing that this is a marginalized community that still is fighting to be accepted and within the queer homo bloc. And I think after 40 years, it's shocking that we're still having these conversations.
But of course, a lot of the campaigns now, if we look at the official statements, they're hoping to eradicate HIV and AIDS by 2030. So we're just
Well, we've already failed. We've already failed on that.
Do you think there's hope to?
Well, President Trump just said that they're not commemorating World AIDS Day in any government sector in the United States. So we're going backwards. We had, since the cutbacks from American funds for the fight against HIV/AIDS, we've seen 600,000 people die in this last year.
That's crazy.
It's the most horrific thing, especially when New York City was the epicenter of it. It's just like you're just washing your hands of it, and it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific, and we do need Britain to take up the slack that has been left by America, and Europe to take up the slack. So a lot of work still left to be done. But I think, I hope people watching this will do the work within yourself. I understand what it feels like. I understand the fear around this disease. But it's up to each and every one of us to fight the fear and fight the internalized discrimination and reach out. Find an organization that you can support, not the big ones because they have loads of money and they don't need your help. Find the small grassroots HIV organizations in your area. Believe me, they exist. They're small organizations in South London that deal predominantly with straight women from the African continent. There are other organizations that are dealing with minorities within minorities. Mm-hmm. So, look out for them and find them and say, what can I do to come and volunteer?
Volunteer, absolutely. And I mean, it's a really interesting point to bear in mind that now that maybe within gay men, there's more protection, the PrEP, and actually the virus is affecting globally more women and women of color.
Yes.
So straight women. So, this is definitely not a disease that only attacks, men that have sex with men. Many women, especially in the global south, continue to be affected, and those are the countries where often there isn't access to medication and support. And so finding those organizations that are targeting the minorities within the minorities, I think it's really important. A week or so ago, I can't remember, there was the Red Run. That's one of the many ways where, anyone, gay, straight, queer, however you identify, if you're able to run, you can run and raise funds. There's all sorts of things that you can do. But I think that's just one example of, we need to bring this conversation into the mainstream.
Absolutely.
And in the same way that, you have BBC Children in Need and, you do your coffee, Macmillan Coffee Morning, we talk about cancer and all those things. We need to talk about HIV as a mainstream issue that the whole of society
it has to come back. And, we saw this lose favor over the last 10 years. And the figures show that it's coming back. The biggest demographic right now in the UK of new infections are young straight women. Yeah. So we need to do the work, and it's work that has been already done. So we're not kind of reinventing the wheel. Mm-hmm. It's getting back on the bike.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, today is World AIDS Day. If you are out and about and you notice people with the red ribbon, especially if they are of a different generation, go and say thank you for wearing that symbol and maybe ask them, what's your connection? How can I help? What can I do? I think, the whole point of this podcast is about sparking conversations, right? And this wasn't even scripted. No, but that's it, because many of the issues that we talk about, the beginning of the solution is found in a conversation.
It starts with that.
And through the conversation, you build a relation. That relation can give you strength to go on. And, going back at the beginning of this, we said many people live with HIV alone. So that's our call to action today, right? We are at the end of the episode again, incredibly. They go so quickly. But please, talk about this, reach out and do something to help accelerate the achieving of the eradication of HIV and AIDS from society.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you once again, and see you all in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.